crap. Well, howdy, folks. Good evening, good morning, whenever it is these words find you. I'd like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker, the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, the answer is always going to be comics. Oh, yes. You know, if you keep this up, I'm going to put you in the storage locker. People will ask what's in my storage locker, and I'll say, cats in timeout. I make no excuses. I was just checking. Do you want to hear how ingrateful this animal is? I saved him. I found him separated from his mother, way too young, in the middle of the road on a Sunday morning, driving into town to get some, like, breakfast at McDonald's or something. And I found this sad little kitten sitting in the middle of the road. You know, he's got a little messed up eye because he had a cherry in it. But really, that's the only, a little scarring right on his eyeball is the only real sign, other than the fact that he's a little bit of a runt. You know, he's like 80% of a normal cat size. He's an odd character, and he shows absolutely no gratitude for my having saved him from a life of certain destitution, at least. But he is my son and my heir, so there's nothing we can do about it. All right, so let's dive right in here. I have in this pile here just an assortment of random comic books. Not necessarily, I plucked a few of them with reason that I might have something to talk about, but it's all just being pulled from the same boxes. What are we going to start with? Well, let's start with Ravage here. All right. Now, I think we've covered before on the show, and I've certainly made no bones about the fact that I really was a fan of the 2099 line. It wasn't all terrific. There was some very good work in there, and there was some not so good stuff. But for the first couple of years at least, they put out more good books than people probably remember. People know Spider-Man 2099 now. I mean, he was in a movie. People like the character. They can see, like, yeah, the bare bones of who that guy in the movie was. That's more or less what was on the page there. It was an interesting take on the character. People remember Doctor Doom 2099, mostly because of the Warren Ellis run, which I don't really talk about a lot, but was certainly very, very big for me for a very long time. And because that run was quite well regarded, people didn't really pay that much attention to the run that came before it, which was John Francis Moore. That was a very good comic book too. It was a bit more in the, late Bronze Age, sophisticated sci-fi mainstream book mold. It had a very set aesthetic. It worked really well. Excellent art from Pat Broderick. A couple really interesting fill-ins by Ernie Cohen. It was a good book. Every month, I looked forward to reading it. Punisher 2099, that's coming for a little bit of reevaluation as well. It's the people from 2000 AD. And that's a big current. One reason why the 2099 books were so good was because they actually did bring in not like the most famous creators in some regards, but like they went to Britain and they got Pat Mills and Tony Skinner off of Judge Dredd right there. And they said, just do some Marvel work for us. We don't care if it's weird. We're actually looking to publish weird. So they actually published a fair amount of unusual comic books that they unmistakably stamped with, the whole, with the 2099 AD and 2000 AD. And it becomes really pronounced in a couple of years when they revamp the line. And there's a really good batch of comics they have Doctor Doom conquer the world of the future. Maybe you've heard of that part of the story before. And so they all become 2099 AD. And those guys were really putting a lot, British creators were really having a say on the lines of that book. And, you still had Peter Davidoff doing his thing, but it was more or less compatible. He could roll with the punches, more or less. But Ravage, well, on paper, Ravage should have been great out of the gate. I liked it. I thought it was a very decent comic book, and I sort of have a little bit of sentimental attachment to it because Stan Lee was involved. That was like the big get for the whole line, is they got Stan to come out and write a book. And we all know, I have no idea how much I know that he pretty much had other people writing his introductions. People have talked about that in public more than once. If you want Stan Lee to do an introduction to your book, you write something and run it past them, or at least, back in the day. And that was sort of an open secret. And no one really seemed to object because ultimately Stan Lee was just this character who, other people wrote sometimes. But that book actually, I think, did have more than a little of his actual contribution in it because it doesn't really work that well. And that it definitely actually reads like something that Stan Lee would come up with as a solution to the problem of, well, how do I make a new superhero based in the future? It's filled with a lot of Stan Lee ideas, and that's one of the reasons why it doesn't really fit, even though it completely plays within the rules, using the characters and in the setting with, different companies that, one of the big things in the book was it's all about the corporations of the future, and the politics between those corporations was much more important than, politics are in our books today, even. And he played within all those lines, but it just felt really fusty. It was about this guy, Ravage. And that's how he looked in the first couple issues, which had some very nice Paul Ryan art. If you ever see those books and you think, oh, they're garbage, pick them up at least to look through them for Paul Ryan. He put a fair amount of work into them, even though what he was putting a lot of work into was a story about this corporate deal maker type who runs afoul of the powers that be in this corporate future, and suffers a reversal of fortune and has to become a sort of an how to put this. He goes on the run. He becomes an outlaw hero. And Stan really goes for like this garbage aesthetic, like, oh, this is a man who has been thrown down to the ground, and he's had to build back up, and I think he had a weird van. I'm trying to think. I think he had a weird van. And then as soon as Stan left the book, they just all agreed that status quo with him is just sort of this urban junk man aesthetic. It just wasn't really fitting. So they just took him out in the middle of nowhere, pumped him full of radiation, and made him a weird monster. And that was the rest of the book. The first part of the book that Stan did, Stan did it. He actually did some of it. You can tell, I think, because of how it's written. And then after his commitment to the book, his brief commitment to the book was over and he stepped away, then they nuked it. They literally nuked it. And this is actually, this cover is actually a great example, I think, of why the series, I'm not going to say it was good, but why it had a little bit of energy after Stan left, because they were just, they had no respect for this guy, no respect for this book. So it was a book about this weird, angry beast creature who just goes around fighting people. And that's, Pat Mills and Tony Skinner right there. What is your vision of a Marvel book? Oh, man. Who remembers the Meteor Man? I was really excited about this movie. I think I even, I want to say I maybe even saw this guy at a con, because I know that they were pushing this movie at WonderCon the year 1993 that I went. Oh, 1993 WonderCon. I was really looking forward, and I liked it. It wasn't a bad movie, but it just completely disappeared. But you look at this cast, just, if you've never heard of this movie before, I mean, just look at this cast. You know, Robert Townsend, maybe isn't that remembered today, but Marla Gibbs, Eddie Griffin, Robert Guillaume, James Earl Jones, Bill Cosby, Another Bad Creation, Big Daddy Kane, Sinbad, and Luther Vandross. You have to admit, that sounds like that was a pretty decent movie. It was he got the main baddie he brought in was played by Frank Gorshin, and it was clear that he was just having a blast working with Frank Gorshin, because there's a lot of affection in the movie. I remember that, even though I haven't seen it in forever. But you know, it really wasn't what people were looking for from superhero movies in 1993. But yeah, if you see this, if you run across that, it's a decent movie. And it is on a completely different wavelength than the action with our esteemed beast creature. Smeggit, that's some mask you've got there. You like it? Try it for size. And then he headbutts the guy. I don't remember anything about this story. Something about a barrio man and his Codex Heroica. Maybe the hero prophecies do concern me. Oh, wait, yeah, it was the one thing that ran between a few of the books was this weird cult of, like, superhero worshippers who lived below the city, and kept, like, the secrets of they did a bit with Darkhawk, even, if I recall correctly. So it was a fairly established bit. Yeah, see, they're all dressed as superheroes for some sort of public function. That's, wow, in the future, like, that's actually kind of astute, that in the future there's just going to be a whole sect of people who cosplay all the time. That's actually less improbable than I probably thought it was at the time. Oh, one of these wonderful entertainment this month ads. I want to say I got ads from these people, but I don't remember ever ordering anything from them. I think I was just on a number of mailing lists based on, you know, being a kid who mailed stuff into comic books. And it's all these books had a really, really anti-corporate line, like all of them, in a way that today would really stands out, because there's just everything in this future world has been destroyed, soiled, despoiled. Didn't mean to rhyme. By the corporate rule. They control every aspect of everything. And so that's the environment where, you know, this beast man is just going wild in the streets and taking down a dump truck. No, is that a troop carrier? It looks like a dump truck. Raging, I don't remember that. Looks like they already had the Street Fighter clones out in forest there. And, you know, I never really enjoyed a fighting game as much as I ever enjoyed Street Fighter 2. That was I sound really old when I say that, don't I? I don't think I played a fighting game. Well, not a fighting game since the 90s, at least. And see, it's just this beast monster man killing a bunch of corporate goons. He's on that looks cool. He's just, they're trying to set him on fire. It's not possible. This body was born long before the primates, in the times of seething volcanoes and grinding earthquakes. I'm able to rip my way through living rock. You want to see what I do to flesh? Now that sounds a bit more like a 2000 AD strip, does it not? And you've just got pages of corporate espionage that seems really opaque at 30 years distance. But it was, it was all, oh man, this ad. I don't think I ever played this game because I didn't have a Genesis, but it's a nice piece of art there. It's Kent Williams, right? If not, I'll get a cut out that I said that. He can retract his claws and just walk around as a normal dude for a while? Oh, okay, I don't remember that. I don't really remember anything that was going on. I don't want to say that, I know I kept up through the first crossover, because I was really looking forward to the first crossover, the fall of the hammer, and then it didn't end up being that great. Let's see what was going on. Another one of these wonderful Rick Parker cartoons. They're pushing the Razor line books. That was the Clive Barker line of books that they had for a while there. Lasted, I don't know, a little over a year. Had early Steve Scroce on it. Early Wachowski writing on it, too. I actually forget which one of them. I think it was one of them, but I can't remember which off the top of my head. Whichever one, they wrote some very good Hellraiser stories. Highly recommended from the later side of the Hellraiser run, when they were just putting out a lot of Hellraiser comics and Clive Barker comics. Like they must have really sold well for them to put Clive Barker's name on so many comic books. That's a weird cross current of the 90s that doesn't necessarily get a lot of examination. But yeah, they published a lot of Clive Barker books. I don't think he ended up happy with how the experiment turned out, other than, it was the first work for, a few very early work for very decent creators. But, this was the early 90s. Up until literally this point in time, the middle of 1993, the market was a sponge. But what happened is that the sponge hit its limit. And suddenly, they were putting out this many titles a week in a bear market. So you tell me where the line's going to go on that graph. They were a victim ultimately of bad decisions made during a boom period. But yeah, James Robinson they got, one of the Wachowskis, Steve Scroce, Bob Dvorak, Andy Lanning, don't recognize his other names, Elaine Lee did a book for them. That doesn't get talked about. Maybe that might even be interesting tracking down, because she's an interesting name. She was interesting before this, it's a perceptive choice, actually. But, there was just too many books going out with, too few, hands really to be able to put out that size of a line. So corners were cut. But I like the work for this. I don't think I would have liked it at the time, but now I'm looking back, it's Grant Mame with Keith Williams on inks. This is nice stuff. Very clear storytelling, real easy to see what's, very Bronze Age. But, doing his level best to, this book is just throwing weird stuff at you. Monsters fighting each other, and it's a strange book. So I'm not arguing that it was a great book, but it was at least a book they tried to make interesting. The Joey Marchese letter, he was a letter hack of the 90s period. And this was the first year of this, so all the books were still in the first year of, still had their, except with the exception of Ravage, they all still had the original creators on them. There you go. I never even played Mortal Kombat, but a few times. I never really got it good enough with any of the characters. And man, here's a sign of just what kind of market it was. 1993, Milestone Comics launched with a trading card experience. Right off the bat, trading card experience. Oh, Gary Frank art for the... and just look at how many books are on here. Like, there is no way you can look at that subscription form in hindsight and say, yes, the market will bear this. Because let me tell you, it's not that there weren't a few decent books. You know, there's never been a time when there haven't been a few decent books, a few readable books. But the amount of readable books doesn't go up the bigger the line is. In fact, it's more liable to shrink. Man, and some of that stuff, you know. Law Dog, Warlock Chronicle. Warlock Chronicles was never supposed to last more than 8 issues. I don't know why they even put that in there. Biker Mice from Mars, Tech World. They gave Super Soldiers. That wasn't the movie. That was Marvel UK. Tons of Marvel UK stuff like Black Axe. I know for a fact that made it to 8 issues. Cyberspace 3000. I don't think that made it a year. Dark Angel might have made it a year, but you know, this subscription form was going to get cut down to size pretty quickly. But they would actually keep trying to publish that many comics for a lot longer than they could sustain. All right, so if I asked you to guess in a vacuum, if I were to tell you that I was about to show you the first manga I ever bought, like, what do you think it would be? Because the reality of it is, well, you get your answer firmly in your mind. You know, could have been a lot of things, considering when I was buying comic books. But what it turned out to be was a Pokemon book that I found at the comic book shop in Medford. And I never bought another one. And I figured out after this that the comic books, now, I don't know really anything about them other than that they're tertiary to the experience, the games, the cartoon. So I don't know. Maybe these are important in some way that I'm not getting. But it didn't necessarily impress me enough to keep buying more. It was just, you know, it was kind of fun to have because I actually was an early adopter of Pokemon. The thing is that I started watching the cartoon. I never, still to this day, played a Pokemon game. But I've seen, I think, almost every episode of Pokemon, at least of the early seasons that where Matty Blaustein voices Meowth. That's my cutoff point. I don't think I've seen anything after that. But I love that cartoon. It was great. That was like my big, you know, anime phase was when I was just watching Pokemon every time that it was on during the day on the Cartoon Network. That's also the reason why, inexplicably, I've seen a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Too. Oh, see, that's cute. They're all talk. I like the ones where they talk amongst themselves. But they're talking about they're still going over the premise. Like, that's why all the humans here take such good care of us. I like it's not like completely it's not completely slavish to the cartoon. Maybe it precedes the cartoon. It's not like the designs. It's not like that Bulbasaur is like different, but it's just drawn like a little bit differently than the. You know, the early Pikachu, when you see him, you know, he's drawn just a little bit differently in the same way that like Mickey Mouse used to be drawn like a little bit differently. Still recognizably the same. Oh, good. Yep. Prepare for trouble. Wait, do they not do their No, I guess they probably couldn't do that in the. They'd use up half the pages with the. Yeah, this is cute. This is not a bad comic book. You know, I probably just wasn't maybe buying it with the eye of having a repeat purchase, because this is otherwise a nice comic book, and $3.50 for a pretty hefty comic book by the standards of, this was a 98, I want to say. Yeah, 98. You know, I think I probably got this before I even started watching the cartoon. I think that the first thing any of us knew about Pokemon was when they were in the news. They hit the news cycle in America because everyone was suddenly scared that the cartoons were going to give people epilepsy, because that had happened with one of the early episodes of Pokemon, and they took that episode out or changed the episode or whatever. So it wasn't a problem anymore. But that's why that's why if they're going to have strobes in a show, they're going to tell you in advance for that reason. And that is how my generation learned about Pokemon. Possibly dangerous. Now, of course, it didn't take very long for them to actually get over here for us to realize that they weren't really very dangerous. We're not talking Legend of the Overfiend here. It's not that kind of monster. People talking, yes, that's the best part of a Pokemon comic, is those people talking. Ash, Misty, and Brock. I still remember. I haven't seen an episode in a while. So remembering Brock's name, maybe 50-50 on that. I remember when I went to see the first Pokemon movie, I was the only person in the theater. I had the whole theater to myself because I went to the late show. And that was a long time before anyone above the age of 12, was having anything to do with Pokemon. But I liked the cartoon, so I went to see the movie. The funny part of that story is I was the only one in the room. I bought my ticket and I went up to the theater, because I think it was on the second floor of a big multiplex in Berkeley. I went into the theater. The lights were on. And there's nothing playing on the screen. And the movie doesn't start. So I'm sitting there. I didn't wait too long. I was pretty much figuring, I'm like, wait a minute, are they going to turn the movie on? Do they know someone paid a ticket to watch it? And the funniest thing, right when I was about to get up and go, talk to someone at the box office, a guy walks into the room holding his dinner, and then he looks at me. And he didn't get mad, but he just sort of paused a minute and realized, oh, I have to go run the movie. Because some weird person bought a ticket to the 9:30 showing of the Pokemon movie. Now, the night show would be packed. That's a different world we lived in back then. Now you've heard my old person Pokemon story. We had to... Oh, and it's funny because I remember I thought I was cool. I thought I was a cool, hip bohemian type, but I just was not in the right dorm when I was at Berkeley, because they gave me guff for going to see the Pokemon movie. And one of the things they specifically said was, you're not going to see any girls at the Pokemon movie. Well, just get in a time machine. That's where all the dating pool is now. Everyone knows who Clefairy is. Your father knows who Bulbasaur is. And that's weird, because I remember when it was just a weird story about a violent Japanese kids cartoon, because that was one of those things that they got people really riled up about. Didn't really go too far, but there were occasional little mini panics over the really extremely violent and sensationalistic cartoons that were coming over from Japan. And yeah, relative to a lot of what was on the television, it was just hard to sell a lot of those Japanese shows because there was a level of, violence or, mature themes or anything that was just completely unacceptable for most of, American children's television. Now, of course, it's not quite so segmented, but it was just hard to find any kind of Japanese cartoons. I was a little too old for Speed Racer. I don't think they still ran Astro Boy, but I know both of those were run at various points in the United States. Both of those characters have at least some small recognition. They did a big Speed Racer movie not that long ago, or 20 years ago. Yeah, that's how you can tell I'm an old person. I remember when manga was Ranma and Dragon Ball. Those were the big imports that were already kind of popular in the American, what American audience there was for manga, which was still being put out in American floppies. And I actually have been kind of digging in some of my back issue buying lately, digging the American printings they did of manga in the 80s and the 90s, published in the monthly floppy format. It's an interesting translation. And usually those are also flipped. So just a completely alien, adaptation of the product, but very, very interesting, I think, for that. They don't do that anymore. I think that's kind of a shame because the format flattered a few stories. Blade of the Immortal, it had a very long run. It was on stands for like 10 years. That sold a fair amount of comic books. Viz, they sold monthly comic books once upon a time. But we don't even think about that anymore. When was the last time anyone tried to do a manga in a monthly pamphlet? I can't even remember if anyone's tried it in 20 years. Yes, me, someone's missing a bet not getting a license to do like a monthly pamphlet color version of Berserk. I think that would do well. No one's going to think to do that. What do we got next here? Oh, how about something completely different? Crimson number 8. I've come across Humberto Ramos' work a few times lately. Early work. Of course, he still works. He's still one of the, I don't know what the last thing I saw him doing was, but he was a guy, he did a lot of Spider-Man. He moved in to be one of the main Spider-Man guys for a good long time there, and he draws a really good Spider-Man, no doubt. This was the, there were 3 launch books at the beginning of Cliffhanger. There was Joe Madureira's Battle Chasers. I actually just did a video on the first couple issues of that. It's up on my TikTok. I liked that book. I actually liked all the Cliffhanger books. They were a pretty decent bunch of books. Battle Chasers didn't, it should have ran for a lot longer with the same excellent creators. The fact that they've gone back to finish the story is remarkable. I don't remember anything that's happening in 25 years' time, but I'm very happy that I'll be able to catch up on it now because I did like that book. It was a fun book. Not the most original thing in the world. Sort of was proud to wear its influences on its sleeve, but really seemed just something that the person was really enjoying drawing, And the same for Danger Girl by J. Scott Campbell. It's a shame that he didn't draw more of that book. I know they've done more with the characters, with other writers and artists, but that was just, and I think I looked at one of those books in one of the earlier videos. I love that series. Crimson doesn't maybe get quite as much attention because Humberto Ramos was big. He certainly deserved to be, among that group. But Of them, you had the guy who had been drawn Uncanny X-Men, you had the guy who had been drawn the Wildcats spinoff for Image, and then you got the guy who'd been really burning it up on the Flash spinoff. And that's just, where the market was at the time. Impulse was a really good book. People liked it. It got good reviews. It ran a fairly long time, even after the original creators left. But it was a hit of a different stripe. So this wasn't the book that had quite the same hype to it. But the funny part is, this is the one that ended up going the distance. Even if this wasn't the one that anyone was really paying attention to at the beginning, Humberto Ramos actually finished his story. I don't know if he's ever gone back to it, but I do know that it finishes. It has an end. He puts it out more or less monthly. I can't remember if Brian Augustin, who's one of the people he worked with on Flash, on the Flash books, but they put the book out on a timely schedule. It finishes its story, and I can't really remember much about it. I think I sort of had read the first couple issues and then just kept putting them in the pile, think, okay, I know I like this book. I'm just going to wait until I have a pile to go back and catch up on. And I think, so I've only read a little bit of it, even though I think I have it all knocking around here. But just, looking at what what I'm flipping through, though I should notice the Beavis and Butthead video game, I don't remember ever playing that or seeing that. Interactive piece, CD-ROM. It's kind of sexy vampire stuff with a strong, teenage soap opera feel to it. Kind of a well thought out premise in terms of sort of anticipating where the market was going to go. Oh, hello. Like, yeah, I heard you talking about vampires. Yeah, they're never my favorite thing to talk about, Guy. I've always say that I'm not a big vampire person, but there's just so many vampires that, there are some vampires that I like more than others. I love, Marvel's Tomb of Dracula is probably my favorite vampire story in any medium. I'll deal with them when, the creators are good or, it's an intriguing premise. That's just the world we live in. What are you doing? Are you trying to eat the arm? He's trying to eat the camera arm. See, if he just wanted to sit there, that'd be one thing. Are you trying to bring down the equipment? Yeah, see, I don't even remember what these characters' names are. There's the voluptuous redhead vampire hunter with a red hood, who's obviously has the relationship of some kind with the. He was the main guy who was a young kid who was just made a vampire, I think was the premise. Welcome to the world of Battle Tank. Why is that front and center in your tank ad? The 90s video game ads were just... Later you got in the decade, the weirder the video game ads. You've seen the video game ads in old comic books. It actually shows you what the video game is, as opposed to just like whatever they were doing, like for the first generation of PlayStation ads. There were a lot of ad men who were dining well. Yeah, see, all very... Well, it's not so bad. It's still stock footage. The Brutally Fun Boxing, I don't remember anyone talking about that game. It was someone putting a lot of ketchup on their steak. I mean, it's got to be a really cheap piece of meat to benefit from the addition of tomato catsup. Yeah, we got all sorts of vampire. So this is the Order of the Red Hood, a name steeped in the shame of something or other. Instead, worn as a badge of honor. Okay. So it's some sort of sacred order that's passed down through the to hunt vampires or something or other. Over the countless generations, many have not survived the testing. The wolf blood burned too strongly in their veins. That's just good writing. That's seriously like, that just draws you right in. You know, totally crazy world building stuff. Love it, love it. Yeah, this looks fun. I'm not going to say it looks like revolutionary or something, but this looks like what would be very, very popular like 5 years after this. Just a little bit of an anime influence, you know, in a time before that was, you know, really quite everywhere yet. All right, how about, oh, here's a good one. Power of Shazam #2. Where are we at? Oh, man, we've whiled away almost an hour. Just me yattering and fighting with the cat. All right. I've said before, I'll say it again. Power of Shazam, one of my very favorite books from the 90s. It was Jerry Ordway. Although, no, he was just scripting it. He did the covers. You were at least getting a cover from Jerry Ordway every month. I don't remember if he, how much of the, I know he penciled some of the book. I think he did. But this is Peter Cruz with Mike Manley finishing. And I would buy it just if Mike Manley were the only name on the cover. He's good as an inker. He's good as a penciler. If you ever run across his Darkhawk, it is really a much nicer looking series than it had any right to be, considering the times. But he also drew it in sort of a weird way that was dissimilar to, you know, later on he developed a much cleaner line. But that book's kind of rough and tumble. It's got a lot of Dennis Cowan in it. But yeah, this is still a nice looking book. Anything that you're going to have Mike Manley putting his brushes over is going to look good. Oh, this is kind of intense for this. Oh, he's having some sort of a nightmare. There's an ad for another Phil Jimenez fill-in on Robin. He did a few of those. They did a good job building Phil Jimenez up over a few years by just turning him into a popular fill-in artist. He didn't. He would come in and he would do one issue of a book, and people would talk about it, and because it was really good. I don't think it was the kind of stuff like that issue of Guy Gardner with the party, where everyone in DC just shows up at Guy Gardner's bar. One of the most meticulously drawn comics I have. Maybe I'll bring it out for the show one of these days. But, you know, that's the type of stuff that made his name. You know, and then, but he did fill-ins for Robin, which completely on the other side of the spectrum in terms of storytelling challenges. But his issues of Robin look really good. And here's Argus, one of the new blood who's spun out of Bloodlines. This one, you know, they weren't all terrible. Not just Hitman. Argus, he actually did show up in Flash for a while. I don't know when the last time he showed up in Flash. But he was a member of the Flash supporting cast pretty much through the Mark Waid era. And he's co-created by Phil Hester. Can't remember. Yeah, I think it was Mark Waid who wrote that one, I think. But this one's written by Wheatley and Gross. But yeah, anything you see with Phil Hester's name on it, even early, he knew how to draw that very early relative to his career. I was looking for his stuff pretty much as soon as I noticed him on the stands. He did a run on Swamp Thing that, one of my very favorite runs on Swamp Thing, even though Mark Millar wrote it. The Mark Millar Swamp Thing is really a great book. He was still, you know, much sunnier disposition. And that's kind of odd to say, considering that's a dark run of comics. but also a very thoughtful run. I thought he added a lot to the mythos that wasn't necessarily followed up on later. So he's I'm not even paying any attention. I'm just sort of yattering on. I don't know. Who is this guy? The Arson Fiend? Oh. That's, this book lasted a while. I don't know how it lasted a while. Because I'm looking back and thinking, the Arson Fiend? Maybe not that challenging of a foe for the Big Red Cheese. And I bought Animaniacs because I love the show. I think my memory is that this was 95. Well, I think that's when the show started. Got started maybe the next year. But I watched every episode of it and the Pinky and the Brain. I was getting too old for cartoons at that point. But I love watching those. And my mom loved watching them too. She had these Pinky and the Brain salt and pepper shakers that like her most prized possession just about. She put them with the family glass. Yeah, I have no idea what is happening here. See, now this is also a slightly more compact subscription form, but still, well, most of these books, DC didn't put something on the subscription line if they didn't think it was going to last at least a little bit. Like, I think Fate lasted at least like a year and a half, I want to say. At least. Damage, I think Damage made it to at least 25. I don't know. I don't know about the Babylon 5 one. I didn't know Babylon 5 had a monthly. I knew they did some special projects. Azrael lasted 100 issues. Did you realize that Denny O'Neill's Azrael, the book that he wrote, lasted that long? And here's an ad for Sovereign 7, a series that has come into my thoughts a few times lately. I flipped through the first issue when I found it the other day. Interesting issue. I don't think anyone's going to argue that it's a lost masterpiece. I mean, it's an interesting one. They could probably stand to put it back in print. It's never been reprinted, I don't think. It's still owned by Chris Claremont. They've gone back to Milestone. They publish Milestone stuff regularly now. There's no reason they couldn't do the same thing with Sovereign 7, or Major Bummer for that matter, although I think we know which of those is probably more likely to happen. Hey, yeah, put a bug in someone's ear. Let's get Chris Claremont to do some more Sovereign 7. What do the Sovereign 7 think of the various shenanigans with the DC multiverse? We need to ask. We need to find out. That's a nice black and white Ordway piece there. The green color hold. Oh, man. See? This was a nice looking book. Oh, they put a whole page for the Fan Awards. A nice looking book, even if I have to admit, for issue number 2, of the things that you're going to put in issue 2, maybe the Arson, maybe you leave him for like issue 17. I don't know. Let's see what's next. We still have some time. A little bit of time. What do we got? How about... Oh, I got one for you. Supergirl 7. This is from the aforementioned Peter David's run on Supergirl, which I was all in for this book. This was the team from my favorite run of Hulk. Not just the Peter David Hulk, although I like all the Peter David Hulk more or less, but the Gary Frank, Cam Smith, Peter David Hulk. The most gorgeous book on the stands. Every month it shipped. And I didn't quite connect with their version of Supergirl, but the book, when they did it, and I don't think maybe Gary Frank even did the first year, but every issue that he did was prime time Gary Frank, as far as I'm concerned. anytime Cam Smith was inking him is just absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. Still very much enthralled to Alan Davis in some ways, but at the same time, you know, I like his style so much better, I have to admit. When I look at his stuff now, it seems over-rendered. You know, he goes for inkers who use a very fine line. He doesn't do this, you know, this much more, you know, Alan Davis-y line in his work anymore. It's never looked as good to me. That's how much difference a good inker can make. And I'm not trying to say it hasn't worked with good inkers, or even that I haven't enjoyed comic books that he's drawn, because clearly I have. But one of my very favorite penciler inker teams in all comics is Gary Frank, Cam Smith. Everything they did together, absolutely golden. I'm not necessarily saying it's the best comic book, but it's worth at least flipping through. The JLA, the big JLA, so that would have been, that's cover dated March 97. So yeah, that's 97 was when that happened. And man, this book, it hit like a meteor. People, I certainly wasn't expecting JLA to suddenly become like the book. And pretty much overnight, JLA was the book to watch. It was really remarkable. I don't think, looking at what he had written up to that time, it honestly surprises me that it worked as well as it did, because he came in and he knew what he wanted to do from day one. He had an artist who could draw pretty much anything you threw at him. And I know that not everyone cares equally for Howard Porter's work, but, you know, he could draw pretty much anything that Grant Morrison asked him to draw. And that's a lot of weird stuff over the course of, 3 years on this book. And man, they came in, every issue seemed like it was an event. They didn't outstay their welcome. As it is, I think, the last year is my least favorite year. I haven't really revisited those stories. But the first year and a half up to, oh, hello. You knew I was going to talk about how much I liked 1 Million. You came in to get on that action because, yes, DC 1 Million is one of my very favorite stories. Certainly, possibly my favorite Grant Morrison story. I actually did not, because when this came out, I think I was going to the comic book store regularly, because it happens when you live in the middle of nowhere. For that period, we just weren't making it very often, money reasons. So I didn't get this until like a while ago when I picked it up out of a $1 box. But it was the only Starman thing that I didn't have, because otherwise I managed to keep up with that one every month, even though they did not have that one at the gas station. See, it's just beautiful, beautiful work. He's so good at expressive faces. He had a little bit of a, people forget this, but when he started out, he actually made his name on books with a comedic tinge. He was on the Marvel UK Motormouth series, and then he went over to Peter David's Hulk. Both, funny books. That was sort of like their thing. That was the, every company has a couple funny books. Maybe they don't always sell that well. But because he could do expressive faces, that was the material that they tended to push him forward. And I remember when he started getting more, straight action-oriented work, like even the Sabretooth special that I did. I did a video on that recently on the TikTok. I was so used to seeing him on, more character-driven, like comedy stuff, and I still love that for him. But, that I don't think he's... Oh, here's an ad for that Elaine Lee book that I was just looking at. I don't remember ever seeing any of these. Like I say, it was a period where I just wasn't always making it to the comic book store, and they weren't being ordered where I was going. Oh yeah, Supergirl goes to a sex club. There you go. I mean, you know, he draws attractive women. That's all. What are you doing? I'm not saying that he can't. I'm not saying that I think he lost anything along the way in terms of skill or anything. He's still, when I look at his stuff, he's a very good artist. But it never jumps out and grabs me like his work with Cam Smith did. Just look at how nice all those lines look. What are you doing? And he drew a good Supergirl. Oh, another Helix ad. What are you doing? Well, the boy just knocked over some manga that was sitting on the bookshelf because he was being naughty. All right, what was I saying? Yeah, we're almost done. Remember, this run of stories had a particular horror bent to them, if I'm recalling correctly. And I bought, you know, I was still on board for the John Byrne Fourth World books, which, what are you doing? Get out of there. I was on board with it. I got it every month. I read it. It maybe wasn't even the worst comic I read that month, but I remember a dang thing that, oh, thank you, I needed that. I remember a dang thing that happened in it. I remember he killed Darkseid once. That's the one thing that sticks in my mind. Everyone goes for that one. Okay, well, someone has just completely lost their mind. All right, are we done here? I think we're probably done. Final Doom. Was that one that had, which ones? Did they actually get Trent Reznor to do a Doom soundtrack that I kept thinking they were talking about at some point? Oh, and here's an ad for all the new DC Comics Online. Oh, they put a lot of programming up there. On America Online, 1996. All right, well, I guess I gotta go deal with this animal at some point. We made it through all 5 comics again. All right, well, I've enjoyed sitting here and yakking at you. Check out the other videos on the channel. Go tell your friends about them. Tell them to watch this crazy person online who just yells at their cat for an hour. God, you just... I got a newsletter. You can subscribe to it. I'm putting up the card now. Goes out every week. There's a lot of stuff in it, me writing on a lot of topics. New reviews go up every day at TikTok, or on TikTok and Instagram. Both. I usually put them up more or less within about 5 minutes of each other. I also have a podcast with Claire Napier. It's called Udder Madness. We talk about Top Cow comics and Mark Silvestri and everything that falls anywhere near that remit. We're on Spotify, we're on Patreon. I've got videos up on the site here where I annotate the oldest episodes. It's more fun than a barrel of monkeys. I think I gotta go do something about this cat. I gotta like play with him or give him a shot or something. I don't know. I don't know where he gets all this energy from.